Some of the new ones so we are basically
all right.
I apologize. I don't think I reminded you. I apologize.
Mix and mingle? Yeah. Kurt's here, but these ones are open.
I heard that you were any talk to Dave. Sure you Phil's
Did he call you? No. Oh, good. Okay. Good. Perfect. Oh, yeah, I did. Haircut. Haircut. I was thinking you look really tan. Well, I was
Won't go home without going to the front seat of my car and getting my bag off the floor. Sherry said she's ready for me. So she said she'll walk me. She said she'll walk me.
okay.
Anyway, so we picked up some crab and some shrimp this last time out of the circus, so just grab that in there. Yeah. So just grab that off the seat there. Yeah. It's in an insulated bag, so it'll be fine. I didn't want to bring it here because I wanted to share it with everybody.
Right.
He didn't get the memo either, so he's not going to show up.
What memo?
That we said it, he had 8:30.
Well, Jody had mentioned it in an email a week ago.
Yeah. See, now, typically what happens is
Usually get a reminder. I had to double check. No. You are sitting here. I'm sitting here. Yeah, no, I didn't. I vaguely remembered something. I was like, oh, I better double check.
I would stop by and check. You like this? You drink the meat this next meat. Does he even read today? You know what? They were $300. My emails and I didn't see anything.
No, it was just something from Jody about the budget a while ago.
Free shipping all the way to
But there was no real reminder.
free shipping all the way to Seattle, and then I bought 3 of them, so 3 of them shipped up on the board for $33.
I think Ryan. Sorry. That's what happens when you come a minute before.
Yeah, they're perfect. We rode them from all the way out to Rockies, and then I rode it from Greens Camp all the way out to Banana Point and back to Greens Camp without riding around from Texas.
You're gonna make the budget work.
Showing up for what, buddy?
I think it's something that
Yeah, usually someone sends out like a reminder like the day before.
That's what I was just I didn't get
So he's got the forks and art. Sometimes we just think we can go forward.
A good thing you stopped by and said,
The guys say that they get
Okay, ready, Joey?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. We'll begin this work session. Whatever we got to do. Whatever you do, I mean, lead us out.
Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. We are just going to do an overview of the budget. We're going to run through the general fund first, and then I'll stop and answer any questions. If anyone wants to talk, if any visitors want to talk at the podium, they're welcome to too. You can also stop me if you have questions about the slide or anything like that. This just I'm gonna try to keep it fairly fast so we're not here for 3 hours. And then I'm gonna go over the enterprise funds and the motor pool. And as you can see, I don't know, does everyone have their budget document due with them? I'm gonna refer to that a little bit, different page numbers. If you want to look at it and follow along, you can, but if not, don't worry about it. On page 5 of the budget document, there's a calendar that kind of states, how we got to this point. I mean, I started sending out templates to department heads in December, and they've been working on their budget since then. So this has been really a long, ongoing process. The first reading of the budget will be May 7th at that meeting. Moving on. So the general fund, it has a balanced budget. You can see on page 15 of the budget, it's flat compared to the current year's budget. The revenue and expenses being approximately $9.5 million. If you take a look at this chart, this kind of shows our fund balance policy. So we want to retain reserves between 4 and 6 months of operating expenses. We're currently at 5.6 months. Now, I don't know if you remember a month or two ago, we brought up the subject of pay for the rest of the municipal building, the $460,000, either using CFA reserves or general fund balance. So if we were to use the general fund reserves, this 5.6 that we're at now in fiscal year 17, this would drop us to 4.95. So we're still would be within our reserve or policy or comfort zone that we want to be at, but I just thought I'd point that out because it's going to be at a meeting in May or June, one of the ones coming up soon. So just be thinking about that.
I
Yeah.
have to ask a question.
Yeah.
So does this mean that if everything went south,
Yeah.
we would have enough money
To run normally.
for 5.6 months?
Yeah, for normally. I mean, if everything went downhill, I'm sure we would do some drastic things.
Sure, but right now, with the funds we have, wherever, we would have enough money to keep us going for a half a year.
Yeah, and actually GASB says, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, their policy that they recommend is between 2 and 4 months. So we're actually a little bit higher than what they recommend. And we do this because, there's departments that we subsidize, like the assisted living facility. And so we just need to keep it a little bit higher than other organizations. Okay, so on page 13 of the budget, there's these diagrams, this chart of revenue sources. The general fund's largest source revenue is property taxes at 33%. Second largest source is sales tax at 30%. And state funding currently is at 13%. And I just want to point out this 13% for state grants for operations, community and or services and community assistance program, that in the last 2 years has been at 16% of our budget. So, and there's a few reasons why it's decreased. The community, on the next slide, the community assistance program, this was otherwise known as the state revenue sharing. They changed the name in January of 2017. This has decreased a couple $100,000 in 2017 and continues to remain around the same. And this is something that they could change on a whim, really. So that's something to be concerned about in the future. State jail contract revenue in fiscal year 2016, sorry, the next slide. It decreased quite a bit as well. They just cut funding for our jails, although our jail costs did go down. So that's a little bit disappointing. Also, and I don't have on here that Steve mentioned to me earlier, is they also cut the airport security officer, and that was $92,000, and that went away this year. So, if sales tax isn't going up, state revenue is going down. If we don't cut, which we've been trying to do, property taxes is where we look at to, if we need more money. So So it goes to the property taxpayers. Next slide, talking about taxes now. So the blue portion is the property taxes for each year. The red is the sales tax. And then that green, is it green? Is other taxes, and that's comprised of tobacco tax, motor vehicle tax, and transient room tax combined. So as you can see, the sales tax revenue has gone down a little bit between 2015 and 2016, and it remained the same this last fiscal year. And but if you go to the next slide, you'll see that however, senior citizen sales is not remaining flat, it's increasing. So reported sales for senior citizens increased between fiscal year 2015 and fiscal year 2017 by $1.2 million. This is a 24% increase over 2 years. But that is the only slide I'm going to talk about seniors today. So I want to keep that presentation going. So that's it. If you go to the next slide, you'll see I calculated the other day that if this budget is approved without amending the property tax levy, there will be a decrease in this year's mill rate. You can see this last year was 11.6 mils, and it will go down to 11.38 mils. So to explain this, the yellow line is the mill rate that pays for school and borough general service operations. Now the difference between the two lines, the yellow line and the red line, is our annual debt service. Basically our bond payments that are paid for with property taxes. So if you're wondering what those payments are for, go to the next slide. This is fiscal year 2019's annual bond payments paid for with property taxes. The area in orange are the amounts that are paid for by property taxes. The amount in yellow is paid by the state of Alaska from a school debt reimbursement program. So this is the program that the state cut by 25% 2 years ago, or last year, I guess. So, but they are fully funding what they had promised this year. So we're hoping for the same thing next year. So total state reimbursement for 2019 will be $466,000 if the state continues to commit to the funding levels that they promised.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when will those bonds be retired?
So the first one, the Aquatic Center bond number 1, that was, and you might wonder why there's 3 Aquatic Center bonds, but I'll tell you, in like 2002 or whenever the harbor issued their bonds, at the same time we issued a little bit of bonds for the design of the swimming pool. That's actually going to mature in 2021, so just a couple more years. And then Aquatic Center number 2 matures in 2026, number 3 in 2027, the VOCA building 2026, the same time that we did the Aquatic Center number 2. School deferred maintenance bond 2024. The library 2028. And assisted living 6 more years, 2024. So, general fund expenses, those start on page 19. So all the department's payroll budgets include a 1% increase for union employees. It assumes a 15% increase in insurance, which we just got our insurance numbers today, and they were actually approximately 9%, so we'll have a little bit of a cushion there, and an increase of 10% in workers' comp. That's for every fund, including IBEW. We budgeted the same way. Mindy in Human Resources actually does the salary spreadsheet, so they're all uniform. This chart shows us what departments or taxes and state and federal funds are being spent on. So the top 3 expenditures in the general fund are public safety, which is, of course, the police, jail, and fire department. And both of our general government and our public school funding at 19% of the general fund budget. So the general government portion, in case you were wondering, is actually the assembly's budget, admin, IT, finance, attorney fees, and non-departmental. What else? So as I go through, I'm only going to pull out and talk about things in the general fund. They're kind of one-time things or just a little bit different. I'm not going to go and focus on each department's budget unless there was significant changes. And the first one we're going to go over is the fire department's budget on page 22. There's a lump sum expense for a new borough-wide AED devices. The current ones they have are 20 years old. This would include trainers. This would include one in this building upstairs here. We were thinking about maybe locating it between the two bathrooms. You sounded like you had a question. And Ryan, do you have anything to say about those? Or
Other than all the ones that are in service now, like you said, are at least 20 years old. Companies that produce them will no longer service them. They don't stand by them warranty-wise. So, yeah, it's just time to get new ones.
okay.
So who is the manufacturer of those? Sorry.
Okay. There's two different brands, and I don't know the names of them off the top of my head.
Okay.
Zoll is one brand, and it has a few Zolls, and then the yellow and black brand, if you're familiar with that, I don't remember what they're called.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
What are these public access defibrillators? These four of them. Would that be for?
I believe they're either on borough vehicles.
Okay.
I believe.
Like the one we have?
It could be that
Yeah.
as well, because the Euro Carver's not on here. So
Yeah,
it would be
probably,
The
yes.
ones that you
Ours
get.
is pretty old now, but I'm going to get it serviced.
Yeah, so
The
if it's the
batteries
ones that
cost
go
more.
I would imagine maybe ones up at the school too.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, there's no way to test to see if some of them are good or test if they're effective still?
Well, they do a self-test, so if it says it's closed to use, it needs, but the thing is, the companies say they're 20 years old, we're not gonna stand by our product anymore, so if it fails in the use and it fails, they're not sticking their neck out for it.
Got it, thanks.
So, do we need trainers for both the fire department and Parks and Rec? Or can we share those trainers with the fire department?
It basically comes down to, we use theirs and they use ours. So you gotta have more than one. And so we're kind of sharing them, where they'll have one under their name, or we'll have one under ours. But when you're doing a class with the size of people, you got to get through a large class, you gotta have at least a couple trainers.
Okay, so we have 2 trainers for the fire department, and we're gonna have 2 trainers for Parks and Rec. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. On page 25 of the budget, you'll find the proposed budgets for the museum, PFSK, and the Mountain View Food Services. These community service organizations are being proposed to be funded out of the general fund. And last year, a portion of the museum had been funded out of the transient room tax fund. But this year, they just funded, or I'm proposing that we just fund the Chamber of Commerce out of the transient room tax fund because the balance is pretty minimal in that count. They only bring in about transient room tax brings in about $55,000 a year. So, as you can see, I put in what they're getting this year for their budget, what they requested, and we decreased, so we could balance our budget, each organization by their request by 5%. Yes.
I have a question. So looking through the financials for the Chamber of Commerce, I noticed they have $109,000 in their savings. So is it out of line to reduce their proposed budget appropriation by a certain percent and move that into either the Clausen Memorial, or the Clausen Museum, and the Mountain View Food Service? How would we go about doing that?
Well, I guess you would have to ask them if that savings, I mean, I think I see where you're getting at, and half of it's reserved for scholarships, it looks like.
So they're
And
not-
16,000 of it is in a tagged fish account. So I don't want to speak for them, but maybe they would be fine reducing it, but I don't know.
I'm sure they won't be. But as an idea, since they have such a large reserves in their savings account, it would be interesting to kind of bring that up at an assembly meeting to reduce the amount that the chamber's getting and have some of those funds moved to the museum and the Mountain View Food Services. So that's what I'm going to bring up at the next budget assembly meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tony,
Yes.
I'm on the board of directors, I can speak to some of that.
Okay, you know what? Let me finish. I just have one more slide, and it'll be the end of the general fund, and then we'll take more questions and comments, and then that's a good time for any organization to talk. Just to the next slide, the last one for the general fund, the library budget is on page 26. Their budget has remained flat for the last few years. However, they are still working on a capital project that pertains to their landscaping, and they had totems, and now on page 65 of the budget is actually, they're planning a shelter. And this will be paid for with donations. It's on page, again, on page 65 of the budget if you want to know more about that. And then Parks and Rec on page 27, they increased their professional services line item for a professional cleaning contract. They've been having a difficult time keeping the facility clean enough and still have staff able to cover their regular positions. And they also budgeted $13,500 for replacement of lights inside the pool. I know we've been hearing a lot about lights and light replacement, but that was the exterior or the above lights, and these would be inside the pool. All of the flat pool lights no longer work, so it's hard to see in the pool. And when they drain the pool in May to do the other lighting project, they're going to check them. They think some of the lights might need to be rewired, and so they're going to look into that as well. So that takes care of the general fund budget. Is there any questions or comments? Anyone want to talk about anything? Ron?
If you're thinking about it.
Okay, I'd just like to address the chamber's reserves.
Do you want to go to the microphone, right? So we can get you on. Thank you.
My name's Ron Lush, serving on the Chamber of Commerce Board, and even though there is reserves indicated, those are in many cases dedicated. We have a scholarship account. We have reserve funds for salmon derby, prize winnings. If somebody catches the winning fish, there's up to a $10,000 payout, so that's in reserves. And I think they should be listed on our forms, but I just want to point out it's just not a lump sum. You could take it away and we'd be fine. It wouldn't be. So we really need the operating funds from the transit room tax to get us through the day-to-day operations without dipping into the reserves.
So that $109,000 is not part of your operating funds, because you have a separate line item budget for operating funds.
Well, no organization wants to operate without reserves of some kind, and I do not have the figures in front of me. I can't go over them, but if we had winning fish taken in a single year, that would take a big hit to the budget, so that couldn't come out of operating.
And so how much is your scholarship amount?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, Jeff. I can't address that. I was hoping somebody could I hope Mara could be here.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Kathy?
Sure. I brought these for the assembly members, but anyone can take one. if you want to pass those around.
I'm here because I want to thank you guys very much for continuing to fund the museum. We're able to offer great programs and projects to the community. We've just replaced some of the artwork from our Rasmussen art collection just like yesterday. So we're able to share some of our resources too with the community. I was a little bit, I kind of went into like, oh my gosh, when I saw the budget, because $39,000 allocated to the Classen Museum is just bare bones. A few years ago, our budget was reduced from $48,000 to $42,000, and with that came a reduction of time that the museum was open. And the museum then later on was like, that hired me, and I, am a pensioner, and I don't need health insurance, and so I don't need to charge them the same amount of money for the number of hours I work, and so we were able to, as you can see, that we paid $28,000 out in salaries last year. You can see that we weren't breaking the budget, But with the loss of $2,100, which seems like not very much money, it could really damage the program that we have at Classen, because that is like a full month's salary for a person. And when you cut out salary, you cut out the ability for a person to make a living in Petersburg, and you also cut out the opportunities for the museum to provide services to the community. And I wanted to point out just some statistics. The number of visitors that came through our museum last year was 4,485 people. Of those visitors, 1,758 were visitors, and that's from the cruise ships, from the ferries. A lot of the visitors that we get are people who drop their suitcases off up at the airport, and then they run down to the museum to take a picture of themselves in front of the great big fish, because they've been up here taking or fishing, and so that's a real draw. So not only do we provide, a place for out-of-town visitors to get to know our little town a little bit better, we also have a public restroom. And so the funds that you allocate to us, we have to spend to buy stuff for the people who need to use the restrooms. And every little thing adds up. We're talking about $32,000, which, when you think about, we're paying for utilities, we're paying for our salaries, we're paying for toilet paper, and those things really add up. And so anyway, then in addition, we have last year 1,400 people, local people came through our museum, and in addition 922 students came through our organization. And this was, we're open 10 months out of the year, and so this was in the 10 months that we were open. So I just wanted to point that out. In addition, we spend just on utilities, we spend about $8,000 a year, and that's just to keep the place warm. We turn the water off in the winter, we turn the garbage off for 6 months of the year. It's an old building, and it doesn't have a lot of insulation, and so when you're thinking about that $42,000, you have $8,000 to pay for utilities, and you pay salaries, and then we have additional utility payments that include our fire alarm and our fire alarm services and our internet and our insurance, our building insurance. So the $42,000 doesn't really go that far. And we do provide a really important service to Petersburg. The majority of museums in Southeast Alaska, all of the museums in Southeast Alaska are borough departments or state departments. Petersburg really gets a lot of bang for their buck with our museum, because we are not a borough. We are not a part of this borough. We don't have to pay health insurance. We don't have to pay union salaries, but we still provide a great service to the community. Wrangell's Museum, which is a wonderful museum, gets 5,000 people a year through their museum, so 600 more than we get. They are a borough department, and So I just wanted to mention that. So anyway, I hope when you're going through the budget that you could find $2,100 to put back into the account so that we can fully fund, so you can fully fund our museum at the same rate that you did last year. Thank you.
Did anyone else want to?
I have a question.
I wasn't planning on talking. I'm sorry, I have a cold too. I just want to say thank you. Last year, no one requested any funds for Mountain View Food Services. That's who I represent. And we had to come back here in February and ask for emergency funds of $4,000 just to make it through the rest of the year. And so now we're back on track and are hoping that we can get funded for $12,000 or $11,400 or whatever, but we very much appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thanks.
When was the last time that any professional services were used at the Parks and Rec?
When was the last, for a janitorial service, you mean? I don't think it was that long ago. I think when Donnie was here, I think he cut it out, but Chandra.
Last year he was here, I think is when we moved it to the post-working, we had custodian for a while.
Yeah.
She couldn't cover everything, and then we moved into the job description of the facility attendants themselves to try to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because they gotta also have to watch the front desk. So they bounce back and forth between trying to help people at the front desk and then running in to check the locker rooms. And we were doing a walkthrough the other day, and we've heard that from customers as well. We're not doing a good enough job of keeping the facility clean. So this is short of hiring somebody, which is even more expensive. It was cheaper to get a service to see if they can come in and try to do a little better job of keeping it nice for people.
And unfortunately, Sandra has a lifeguard class she's teaching at 4, and she was going to come at 3, but her computer crashed, which she needed for the lifeguard class, so that's where she is, right? Or else she would have been here. But if you have questions like that too, just email her or visit her or ask me, and I can ask her or whatever. I'd be more than happy to help. Any other questions?
What are we missing out in this fiscal year, proposed next fiscal year for sales tax regarding the seniors sales tax extension?
Well, it's hard to say. We now have 565 senior tax cards. I think I was looking out to see what I thought sales tax would, how it would forecast out to the end of this fiscal year, and I think it's just going to remain flat. And I think it will continue to do so as we have more and more seniors turning 65 in this town.
$6 million.
Yeah, I can't take 6 million and just, times it by 6% for $370,000 because there could be sales over the $1,200 cap, so that wouldn't be accurate. So that would be nice and easy, but it wouldn't be accurate. Yeah. So enterprise funds. Oh, is there any more questions? Okay. Enterprise funds, it starts on page 29. As you can see, they're not funded by taxes, barely any grants, just basically they're self-supporting organizations, and they use their charges for services to collect the revenue. You can find these charts on page 29 again. I just threw this slide in there. You can see a lot of it's payroll expense, supplies, capital outlays, depreciation. I don't really have anything to say. You're excited about this one. This slide has a lot of information. If you look at the bottom balance, when you look through the enterprise fund departments, their ending balance is a negative figure. for every single fund, and this is because they must budget for full depreciation, and they usually have major capital outlay costs to replace already depreciated items. The enterprise fund must budget for the full cost of these capital outlays, even though at fiscal year end it'll be depreciated over a certain lifespan in the financial statements. So a common way to get a better hold of what their budget's doing is I add back in their depreciation and capital outlays just to see where they're at then. And all of the funds do have a positive balance that way. It's just, if they still had a negative balance, we would really need to talk some more.
Yeah, it's basically the assumption is if depreciation really didn't exist, in other words, things never wore out, and we never had to buy new things, this is how their net income would look. Clearly, that's not necessarily reality, but it's, it kind of shows you how the balance works as far as what our operating funds are what we're doing in the enterprise funds, and how much of that should be going towards the depreciation side and/or, again, capital fixing things that are wearing out.
So if, I'll say, if we subsidize, the general fund subsidizing assisted living under $50,000 this fiscal year, if that's actually in the budget, if that wasn't in there, they'd still be, after doing this exercise, at a negative, $130,000. So, anyway, moving on. Electric fund, it starts on page 31. Capital outlays within the electric fund, $100,000 to complete the insulation roofing project on the EMD 16 building, $80,000 utility mapping update, and $163,000 in miscellaneous capital outlays, poles, and things like that. You'll see those on page 32 of your budget. New capital projects on page 74, the auto meter reading in the harbor. And page 77, downtown street lighting. They're going to replace the downtown lights. And page 76, Scow Bay Pole Yard, $50,000 to construct an open-sided shed roof to store the materials. So they're in the capital project funds in your budget. There's really good descriptions of what, more than what I just read about the projects, and you can talk with Carl Hagerman if you have any questions on those. Here's a picture of a committee met a few years ago, and they came up with this. I think it might be, they were thinking blue. I can't remember what color blue. I'm not sure.
I just remember I wanted red.
I remember you wanting red. Maybe it's still up for discussion. I don't know.
I think it is.
Okay. Carl, don't talk to me. Talk to Carl.
Except for you.
You weren't on the committee, were you? Yes, I was.
Well, and if you look at that picture, it looks like the flowers are going out into the street, but I think those would actually be turned, so they'd be like how they are now. I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in, because everyone always, it's fun. It's a lot more fun than some other stuff we're talking about. Water fund, page 35. The budget includes a 2% increase in water rates on July 1st. In 2012, the City of Petersburg Council approved an ordinance to increase water, wastewater, and sanitation rates each year for 6 years. This is the last year of the scheduled increase. This was put in place after a rate study was done to look at future projects and plan out how they were going to be paid for. In combination with the rate increases, the water and wastewater funds have gotten to take advantage of some ADC grants and low-interest loans that have helped keep utility rates as low as possible. Some water capital outlays, $18,000 machinery and equipment, $50,000 Cabin Creek pipeline pigging, City Creek Dam rehabilitation for $375,000. You'll find that on page 71. Does anyone have any questions about water fund? Okay. Next slide, wastewater. Wastewater has a lot going on. And in fact, these projects aren't even all of them. There was one that wasn't actually, will you take this and pass it down, please? Take one and pass it down. one that wasn't in the budget that we missed, Pump Station 3 at Icicle. So there's the SCADA upgrades, Skyway Pump Station 1 to upgrade to handle incoming flows and prevent overloading. And these ADC loans that they get, they're really low interest. I mean, 1.5% is fantastic. 20-year loans. Pump Station 4 is at Hungary Point to replace a corroded force main. Composting and septage receiving project on page 73. And Casino Street sewer main replacement for $145,000. Replace 1,000 linear feet of sewer main and 6 manholes. So are all of these pump stations needing to be replaced kind of at the same time because they are all put in at the same time?
Well, we're working through that. A lot of them were put in at the same time, but we're working through them. A couple years ago, a few years ago, we did Pump Station 5 was an alert station.
Right.
We kind of knocked that down to CLB1 because there was an issue with that.
Oh, right.
We're kind of working through the system and doing upgrades.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, page 39 is the sanitation fund. The budget includes a 2% rate increase, and again, this is the last year of the rate increases. Interesting fact about the sanitation fund, they're the only enterprise fund not to have any debt, so that just automatically makes them my favorite fund. Capital outlay on page 40, $40,000 for machinery and equipment. $10,000 for the garage door for the baler. Apparently, it just stays up all the time because it doesn't.
We've got it closed all the time.
Oh, you got it closed all the time.
Yeah.
Oh.
We're going to try and rig it up so we can use it as things get busier this spring, but it's on its last legs.
Okay. And then 2 10 to 15 yard roll-off containers. So Chris was telling me the big dumpster is at the harbor. Those are 13 yards. So those really big ones to be used for like construction projects and just to have as spares because the one they had on hand is being used at the commercial drive-down dock.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then $10,000 for wire tie system, rebuild parts for the baler. Any questions? Garbage.
Chris, I'll be the one who professes his ignorance. What is the wire tie system?
That is on the baling machine. We put the garbage in and we compress it down into a small bale. Then we have to actually put tie wire on it so that when you eject the bale, it doesn't just goes back out again.
The name really says exactly what it is. Thanks, appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. The Harbor Fund rates include a 9% rate increase. In 2016, the Petersburg Borough adopted the waterfront plan, taking into consideration long-term projects. This rate increases in response to that plan. You may remember that last year during budget time, we kind of warned everyone that this was in the works, and you should be seeing an ordinance pretty soon in the near future to increase those rates so it can go in effect on July 1st.
How does that compare with the rest of Southeast?
We're the second highest in Southeast compared to Juneau. Juneau's highest.
Will you be the highest after you do those rates?
We will still be up there.
Who's got the best harbor in Southeast?
Petersburg.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. I've been to every one. I don't mind paying it.
Capital outlays are on page 42 of the budget. $15,400 for South Harbor float maintenance, $340,000 to rebuild dock project adjacent to the harbor office. There's pictures below of what it currently looks like. $47,000 continuation of harbor dredge study, $120,000 in case there's a potential land exchange with Petro, and $25,000 South Harbor fire shed replacement. This is the fire shed located at the head of D float, and it's 40 years old and falling into the water.
So is the 120 for the petrol, is that for, what's that about? Is that for?
We got that number from the difference in the assessment.
Okay, the assessment difference. Okay.
Which has gone up since the
Sure.
last time we came back. It's 85,000.
Well, and just to note too, just because this is in the budget doesn't mean it's going, you know, for sure the assembly has to vote on it, and it's in there though, if it's in there and we do spend under 120,000, I will have to do a supplemental budget on it later, so. Page 43, you'll find the elderly housing fund. Elderly housing is for low-income seniors over the age of 62 or the disabled. Rates are set by HUD. HUD covers approximately 70% of the resident's housing costs. The remaining 30% is paid for by the resident. So they're set. We can't do anything. Elderly housing fund is in good shape. The subsidy that's paid for by the general fund is not for this facility, it's for the assisted living facility. Just I wanted to note that. Sheila's been each year replacing windows in this facility, as it is the older side, and carpet and appliances as they break. And she would like to paint, trim decks and sheds this next year. Assisted living fund on page 45. The assisted living is for individuals over the age of 55. There's 20 units total. 3 are currently independent units. Residents in the 17 assisted living rooms are charged for room, board, and services depending on their service level needs. Revenues are either from self-paying residents, state general relief, or Medicaid. The general relief is just until Medicaid kicks in, because a lot of times it takes a while. Capital outlays on page 46. $7,000 for carpet and vinyl replacement, $4,000 for dining room and office chairs. And I put that picture in there because she said it to me. I was like, $4,000 for chairs, really? And she's saying, and then she didn't tell me whether there was dining room chairs involved too, 12 of them for the dining room. And she sent me a picture of her office chair, and it was covered, I don't know if you can see, but it's black duct tape all over it.
We're trying to make do where we can.
So just a new roll of duct tape is all you need?
Yeah.
I'll buy that.
It's still comfortable. Yes, right, you sit in it.
It's better looking than silver duct tape. And then $11,000 for the Hoyer lift. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, Hoyer lift. The one we have now is it's a giant machine that can lift people up off the ground. The one we have now, you have to get a cloth underneath it. You have to roll them back and forth so if they're hurt or anything. Of course, we wait for EMS for that, but they're picked up like that. This is a stand-up Hoyer lift where a person can be sitting and they hang on and it gets them up. You can put them on the toilet, whereas the other one you have the cloth underneath them, so if you need to get them on the toilet, and then when you're picking them up in the cloth one too, it just bunches them all together. For this one, it has straps that go under the thigh and around the waist, and they have a place where they can rest their arms. So you can move a person with one RA rather than 3, which saves a lot on everything.
Yeah.
You can get them into the shower, in and out, without the cloth and everything.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Sheila? Motor pool. There's 3 replacements planned. There's pictures of 2 of them below. The Caterpillar excavator from 1992 and the wash truck. And then there's the Harbor F-250 pickup truck that's also up for replacement. And there's a really good slide or a memo on page 81 of the budget that just explains in detail of why these vehicles need to be replaced and how many times they've been looked over for replacement and things like that.
And one quick thing too, and Carl, you gave us a big walkthrough on that last year, the replacement schedule and the reasoning for it. That's super good. Carl's got the formula.
You don't want me to walk through it again?
No, we don't.
I offered, I said, Chris, Chris has never had to do that himself, so maybe it's a good time, but didn't have any takers.
Not so much. Sorry, Jody, you interrupted.
No, that's the highlights of the budget.
May I, Ryan, what's the expected service date? When do you guys bring in the new ambulance in?
They're putting them, lowering them off along the cabin chassis, probably having to speed, or they're probably being bolted on, so I don't know how long after it gets here before it gets put in service, but, so I think end of the second week of May it should be on the bar. And then, it goes to motor pool for a while, and they check it over and stuff, and then go on to service.
And please call or email anytime, and if you want to dive into something more, maybe we could schedule another meeting, or we can talk about it at the first reading of the ordinance on May 7th.
I have a couple questions. So for the police department, are we budgeting for the Alice training in this fiscal year?
The Alice training is not actually costing us anything.
Okay.
We're hosting the class, so we actually received 2 free seats in the class, and I just received flyers and pamphlets to send out, so that will be going out this next week to all the local Southeast, and we're going to try and get it posted on the APSC training website also.
What is that, Alice?
It's the alert, lockdown, inform, and I forget what the last one was.
It's kind of the active shooter drill.
Yes.
Somebody comes into a public building.
Yes, and they actually encourage the hospitals and the schools to attend it, and I'm also going to extend it to PFI and the other canneries for their office people so that they can train in case they do have an active shooter. We did have that one guy a couple of years back that tried to buy that firearm because he was upset with PFI, so I'm going to offer it to them, and they also adapt it to churches and some other places too. Actually, it'll cost us coffee and snacks. I think that's all they ask us to provide. So.
I have another question. Why is there a huge jump in the utilities for the jail?
It's because of this new building. We're covering more of it. For the old building, we had 2 separate meters. One meter was covering a larger portion of this building, and then they had a separate meter that was part of their facility, but not all of it. And I think we were paying all of the water, and the police weren't paying any water, sewer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but then now that we're in this building, we're splitting it 50-50.
So it should, between the two, about even out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have another question. Okay. So regarding the electrical department, we went through this reorganization process over the winter time, and we talked about, providing training for employees that we had who might be, we could train them up to take over for the next person moving up through the process. Is there any thought in this budget about training for either existing employees or bringing on new employees who could shadow the people who are possibly getting ready to retire or moving on? I mean, we've had this discussion before. There's several employees who have a lot of institutional knowledge, and before they decide to retire or do something different, it'd be nice to capture that knowledge. Is there any planning in that electrical department budget for that?
Not in this budget, no.
Okay.
It's a valid point, and it's something that we'll have to address, but I don't believe we're that close to retirement, so I don't know.
Okay.
When somebody longer, once they'll be staffed and retired. But it's coming up. This budget doesn't reflect nothing done on trying to find a replacement and get them training for somebody. As far as I know, in this budget year, the existing staff will be in place July.
So, and so through manager, it's just, so I'm not, I guess, I'm fine with that. But is there any funding in the budget to train the employees that you have now for either more leadership skills or more training so that they can move up within the ranks?
Yeah, there's training money available.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anything else for today? All right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone.
And a reminder to all the fellow assembly folks, like, if you have questions, like, these are the people we were seeking out, if you have specifics. Please do so. Come on through.
If you have questions, and seek out Jody or whoever before we get into the three readings, and we have to try to do it after the meeting, where if you, by the way, every one of you is very capable of surprising us, and you may ask a question that we won't have an answer to right away, which then delays us getting an answer to you. So the ask ahead of time gives us a chance to research it and get back to you, rather than doing it at the reading of the budget, and then we may delay it.
You want us to be proactive, Steve?
Come on, however you'd like to operate.
Okay, well, we're
So, a question for you. Based on the comments that you've heard from members of the public in the assembly, do we need to send them to you in a written form to answer some of those questions regarding cuts to certain entities, and how would you like us to deal with them?
Yeah, the easiest way is to, an email. If you want us to look into something or get you information, an email or come in and talk to Jody or I, and then we'll look into it. We can't act on anything.
Absolutely.
Just so everybody's clear, none of the stuff, you can't change this budget until it gets to the first reading, unless you find an error, when the assembly as a body votes on it. Sure. But we can look into things, we can get you information, we can provide backup data, we can seek out backup data, if we need to talk to the chamber or whatever else. We can make sure all that's there and available and sent back out to you. And that way, when you get to that first meeting, if you need to make a change in the budget, you hopefully will have what you need.
All right, thank you.
Cool, thanks everyone.
Thanks for everyone's time.